Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, today is one of those season 2 addendum episodes.
Yes.
So tell us specifically, what show are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about Boop, the Betty Boop musical, which premieres on Broadway in 2025. So, I mean, it just opened and closed last year. It was it didn't, I don't think it lasted as long as it probably should have.
That's the way it goes, right?
Yeah, and, it did have a cast album. I didn't get to Broadway to see it, obviously, but did kind of comb through that cast album and really enjoyed the music. Very much was like, following it and going, this would have been so cool. But on it's really weird because you go, oh, Betty Boop. Okay, I know Betty Boop. That's an animated character. Is that going to work in my brain? Like, how does that work on, like, it's not an instinctive. People go, oh, I want to see that because they understand what it would be like. It takes people a while to go, how are they doing that animated thing? How would that, I have questions.
Right.
And I think that, some of that is probably part of it. Also, I didn't see tons of marketing for it. So, don't be saddened if you didn't get to see it. I think a lot of people were like, whoa, this happened, and then it went away. And so immediately it is going back out on tour, which is super helpful. So I'm glad that we are kind of putting a little bit of a tag at the end of this season, and we're picking up all of those shows that are now going out on tour from, early 2025 , which is pretty, that's pretty, I'm sorry, I think that's impressive. Look at us.
I think so.
We're going
I think
back.
so too.
Look at how many we're having to pick up. Wasn't it like we had 8 musicals that were now on tour?
Yes.
From the beginning of the season that just never made it onto our list because they weren't touring, and now they are. And
now they are. So we need to pick them up. And I will say about this one, it is not often. Normally I just think, oh, I'll see that when it comes through, right? Yeah. It'll get through town. It'll get through somewhere near me and I'll go see it. As you know, dear listener, neither Tracey nor I are based in New York. So when we see shows, typically, although we certainly go to New York from time to time for different reasons, but typically we see them out of town.
Yeah.
And this was one that I followed and I was so excited to see. And here's why. It features a libretto by my guy, Bob Martin.
Oh,
who also wrote The Drowsy Chaperone.
So I was like, I'm looking at this, preparing for this episode, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's by Bob Martin.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh,
Kristin's
it's by Bob
Martin. Die. And you know what? I didn't know that. I mean, everybody comes to try to like consume musicals differently, and
that's exactly
I try
right.
not to do too much before I actually experience the show, so my brain isn't overworking.
Yeah.
And so just listened to the soundtrack, and then got an overview of the plot, and now that it's revealed that it's Bob Martin, I went, oh, that makes perfect sense. Like this is Bob Martin to a T.
Yes, it is.
We've got the historical moving into real life and exploding, and then
Yep. Well, that is a really interesting point that you make, like how you approach a show. You want to hear the music and know the story and go see it cold.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah, I know.
Like I am like, I want to know, when was the first idea? Who thought of this? Right? Where does that go back to?
This idea?
But that goes back to our different approaches to theater. Like you started as a practitioner. You're trained in music as well as theater. I'm not trained in that. I'm trained in theater, but from a more history perspective than performance. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition of how we want to go see a show.
Their own.
Exactly. So if you don't know Bob Martin, I think we've probably talked about him on this podcast. Certainly, if not a show. We've talked about him by way of my love for The Drowsy Chaperone. But he also wrote or co-wrote the libretto for The Prom, which is another.
We did The Prom. Then of course.
Oh, we did do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we?
Uh-huh.
We did. Okay. I love that show.
Everything is just
it all
come
runs together
in our brains. We don't even remember what we've done
We
anymore.
don't remember. But it's because we live in this world, so I can't remember what I've written about or spoken about or recorded about. I can't remember. They all run together. But I will say Bob Martin, he wrote Elf, he wrote The Prom, he wrote The Drowsy Chaperone, all of which are emblematic of the types of shows that make my butter melt, right? I love these shows.
What kind of statement is that?
I love them.
Every once in a while, you can appreciate that Kristin is from the South, because I'm like, what? Who came up with that phrase? And it is perfect, and it is incredibly descriptive, but oh my goodness.
I guess I could say they float my boat. Maybe that's more. Maybe that's more continental.
Yes.
But regardless, because of Bob Martin's attachment to the show, plus I love a Jerry Mitchell show. I mean, Jerry Mitchell, very much an actor, or he started as a dancer, then a choreographer, and then now a director. And I love his style. So this one was made for me, and I missed it because, as you've already pointed out, it opens August 5th, 2025, but it closes like July 13th or something. It only plays 113 performances. So, or 112 performances. So I did not get my shot to see it. So I am really looking forward to experiencing this show as it's on the road. And when I do, I'm going to take with it what I have learned in researching for this episode, as I know you have done a ton of research as well. And I think it's really helpful to start our conversation in 1917. And what happens in 1917, which is obviously more than a century before this show would later premiere on Broadway. But what happens in 1917 is that a man named Max Fleischer invents a technology called the rotoscope. And what the rotoscope is it's a projector and a glass drawing board. And what it allowed animators to do was trace over live action film one frame at a time. This was groundbreaking because what it allowed was, instead of having, like those flip book kind of things where you would see stick figures move as you flipped through it, what this allowed was to get really the actual swing and sway of the human body, right? It was much more reflective of reality. And so suddenly these cartoon characters begin to take on real human form rather than being boxes and circles and sticks, right?
Yeah, like if you watch the old Disney cartoons, like how the people, like what we call now cartoonish ways in which they walk, in which their body lumbers and things like that, that's just, animators trying to do everything by hand, and the rotoscope really allows you to kind of get posture and stride and like all sorts of things, as you said, like how the human body actually moves. It's absolutely groundbreaking, but it leads to it, that's what opens up the world for things like Snow White and actual,
that's right,
because cartoons before did very much feel like flip books.
Yes, exactly. And you have to think too about where we are in terms of film history. We're not yet to the talkies, right? We're to synchronize. Well, we're to a piece of film that's overlaid with music, right? Yeah. And so the fact that the body could match in a lot of ways the beat of the music, that's a whole new technology, and it really is enormously impactful. Of course, the technology is used by all the studios. I mean, Disney used it for Snow White even, which didn't come for another 20 years, but it was a cutting edge thing that revolutionized animation. And in the 1920s, Fleischer and his brother start what's called Fleischer Studios. They're making cartoons in New York, actually at 1600 Broadway. That's where their studio was. When I saw 1600 Broadway, my mind immediately thought of Beautiful, the Carole King musical. because Carole King wrote at 1650 Broadway. So not far from where the Fleischer Brothers studio was. It's just the Fleischer Studios. Although the building that the Fleischers occupied has actually been torn down and turned into luxury condominiums. But nevertheless, it's still that neighborhood. So a lot of artsy things going on there. And the Fleischer Studios characters were really steeped in an identity of New York, right? They were very edgy and adult and gritty, as opposed to their primary competitor, which was Disney, right? Yeah. And Disney's focusing on a more family-friendly and obviously a very different aesthetic from...
They're moving from what, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit to Mickey Mouse at this
That's
point.
right. Yeah. Exactly. Meanwhile, in 1930... the Fleischer brother, or the Fleischer Studio, I'm sorry, it's two brothers. It's not Fleischer Brothers Studio. It's Fleischer Studios, but it's two brothers who man it, very much like Disney were two brothers manning Disney Studios. But at any rate, in 1930, the Oswald the Rabbit and Steamboat Willie and all of those things are happening at Disney. We get a character named Betty Boop that drops from... Fleischer Studios. And of course, she premieres in a cartoon short called Dizzy Dishes in August of 1930. Now, interestingly, a couple of really interesting things about Betty Boop when she hits the screen for the first time in 1930. First of all, she was a secondary character. She was not the main thing. She was just part of this Talkertoon series where they had a lot of animals with human characteristics. And yes, I did say animals. So Betty Boop herself started out as a French poodle with human characteristics. And I promise you, you can Google this and see Betty Boop as a poodle, and you'll see how she started out and how they took her poodle ears. And as time went by and she became more and more popular, and they decided we're going to transition her into a fully human character, which takes about a year, her poodle ears transform into those iconic hoop earrings that she always wears. But that's how she starts. She starts as a French poodle, a secondary character as part of this Talkertoon series. But as time goes by, it's very clear that Betty Boop is the main event. So after, go ahead.
I just looked it up because I had never seen that, and I'm like, Betty Boop as and it literally finished with as a poodle.
I told you
this is not just you're not the only person.
No,
yes, indeed, she is a poodle.
Yes, she is. But she's like walking on two legs at some point. I mean, you can see how she's kind of like, Cro-Magnon man, how she starts hunched over and then grows up. So it's interesting.
Weird.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting, huh? But like I said, so out of this cast of, animals with human characteristics, it's Betty that is the most popular. And so she eventually gets her own series. And I love the way, I've talked many times about Chicago Tribune reporter Chris Jones and my love for his writing. But in 2023, he wrote about this character, and I love this description. And he says she was an affectionate caricature of a maybe Jewish, certainly New York, jazz-age flapper with an outsized head, quizzical eyebrows, huge eyes, a 4-inch waist, a low-cut bodice, a short skirt, a Gotham-tinged baby voice, and a scat-like catchphrase that would riff down the decades. Boop, boop, ba-doop. Mm-hmm. So, there you go. There you go. Isn't that a great description of that character? Yeah, so
there's a lot. I mean, and here's maybe where some of there's a little more context here, right?
That's why I was like, I wonder if Tracey wants to talk about this.
So when I started researching this, I got pulled into like a research vortex of shows about who is this character based on? We know she's a poodle first, but she still looks like herself. That's why I was like, the poodle thing just threw me right now. I was like, okay. But there has, in the last 25 years, there has been a discussion about the race of Betty Boop and what the race of this character was and who she's based on. I don't have an definitive answer for you. What I can tell you is kind of both sides of the story, essentially, is that there are some folks who believe that this character was based on a flapper Cotton Club singer named Baby Esther Jones, who apparently had kind of the same kind of boop boop badoop kind of tagline. So we have that aspect of it, and then there's Fleischer Studios negates that and says, no, this one was based on somebody named Helen Kane, who was a white singer at the Cotton Club as well. So, like, there's, yes, I think there is, and I'm just going to go silent because I'm trying to, like, figure out how, like, what do there's a lot of discussion on both sides of the aisle on this one. And I'm just going to go out and say that I have not done enough, like, research. I haven't read all of the research because I was, like, pulled into this vortex and went, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than
right than a cartoon character. Right.
But there's a great controversy over whether or not, this is kind of like racial erasure. There's all sorts of stuff that's kind of going on in here about whether or not the Boo Boop Doop was stolen from a black artist, and the history of kind of commodifying black artists and then not feeling like we needed to pay them back at all. So there's that aspect of the story. There's the other aspect that Fleischer Studios has pushed back against this quite a bit. So much so that PBS, in one of their, it was a documentary about the issue, had to retract their statements. That this was actually, based on this other artist. So there's still a lot of controversy. What I do know, and the thing that I think is really interesting here, is that this character was beloved for so many years. I mean, I don't know about you. I remember watching Betty Boop cartoons.
Of course, yeah.
Which is funny because, like, my kids would never, ever see them.
Right.
Like, they're not something that are, like, going to be part of their zeitgeist. They're not going to be doing that. And some of it, I think, is because of this kind of, like, cross-cultural, it's not cross-cultural, but, I mean, it is kind of the use of the rotoscope to erase black bodies
right
on screen. And that's part of the reason we don't see Betty Boop a lot anymore. But, yeah. So anyway, here's what I do know. The rotoscope is amazing invention. When Betty Boop's cartoon gets moving, a whole lot of her dances are drawn with the rotoscope.
Right.
A lot of those dances are being danced by people of color.
Right.
Not white artists. So, the Fleischer Studios can say that this was based on a white character. This was never intended to be a black character. It was always meant to be a white, but yet they are tracing the body of a Samoan character was one that I read about, African American singer that I was reading about them doing in a different cartoon, but they're tracing these black bodies to get the movement working for this particular character. So there is a controversy there. And I think this is another place, and I've seen a little bit of this kind of controversy come up around the show. It hasn't been nearly as loud as I would have expected it to be. But obviously, I think this is still part of the discussion that is happening around this particular musical.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't attribute that to its quick end or anything like that. I personally, I loved what I heard. I thought it was great. I thought, the lead was amazing.
Yeah.
Jasmine Amy Rogers. But Jasmine Amy Rogers is an African American woman.
That's right. And I wonder if that's how they were able to skirt a lot of the...
To try to be like, okay, this is...
And that is not to diminish her unbelievable skill, right? Like, she apparently in this role kills it.
She is amazing.
Yes. Like, every review. I think Chris Jones's review... is like the whole, I mean, probably if you're, when you think about newspaper copy, you think in inches. So it's probably 8 to 10 inches of talking about how good she is.
And I just think that because it's been, it just seems like everybody is dancing around this issue.
Right.
Like, this seems to be the elephant in the room that nobody's really talking about or attributing. Like, people are trying to like find some way to navigate this, but nobody's really talking about the actual question.
Right.
So, that's why we do this. We do this
That's
to make
right.
sure that you kind of understand that there's more to this discussion, and it is not a discussion that has been
Settled.
clarified,
Right.
or settled,
Right.
or there are people that I am very much respect on kind of both sides, scholars on both sides of it, but it just has not been as explored, and I'm really interested to see how future historians kind of tie the Broadway run to this larger question, because a lot of people will say that this is one of those situations that have been so blown out of proportion because it was some sort of myth. It was this plagiarism myth that came up around it, and it ends up being kind of one of those weird kind of circular reasoning, self-fulfilling prophecies at that. But because there hasn't been like clarity on kind of how we should view this character, I do think that does impact how it is received.
Right.
In some places.
Right.
I think that there are a lot of people in the world who just heard me say all of that badly, and like awkwardly, and went, I never thought about that in a million years. Never even crossed my mind that, that was a white character or a black character. Like, there's a lot of people that here, I mean, we can argue whatever we want to argue, but I really think that is the elephant in the room with this particular show, is like what she has such a care, like her body is her character.
Right.
That's the way she's looked at. I mean, we're not following Betty Boop wasn't put together on her brain or because of the great scrapes she gets into. They're drawing kind of a sex icon, aren't they?
And they get in trouble for it down the road. Yeah.
So I think that this is me awkwardly trying to say there's an awkward conversation here that we probably needed to have some clarity on, and I can't find anywhere any information on where these conversations may have happened in the development process. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
and you know what? I would imagine, I don't know this, but I would imagine that they really didn't come up in the development process. I certainly haven't. Now, I have not.
Or it's just too early enough for us to start hearing.
Maybe so. I was certainly not a part of the development process, so I was not in the room where it happened. But I think that what the creators of this show set out to do was make a fun, happy, funny, enjoyable, family-friendly musical. And in fact, Jerry Mitchell has stated multiple times, Jerry Mitchell, of course, has directed the show, has stated multiple times, I wanted a family-friendly show that everybody can go and just enjoy and come out singing the songs. And so I don't imagine that there was anything more to it than that. But I think from a historical perspective, and you and I are historians, and so it is incumbent upon us to say, okay, so maybe there's more to the character of Betty Boop that not necessarily relates to the musical of Betty Boop, except in as much as she was the inspiration for the story, right? Well,
yeah, and you can't be naive,
right,
Jerry. Sorry, I'm gonna say it. You can't be naive. Like, there's a reason we don't do, we don't kind of revive, and we don't try to go back and fix stories about colonialism either.
Right.
Like we're getting to the point where we're like, when it becomes a huge part of the story, it colors how we see it now because we have learned something.
Right.
My only thing right now is that it's like the musical really is really cute. Yeah. Like, it's awesome. Like, little tiny Betty Boop, who, everybody enjoyed on the screen, somehow finds her way into the big wide world and goes from being in black and white to living a life in color. And that, I wasn't watching. I was listening to her experience that, and I was right there with her.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it. I was like, this is masterful. But then this thing hit me, and I went, but we're carrying some baggage, right? Sure. So you can't be naive, Jerry. Like, it is a family-friendly musical. It's awesome. It's great. It is something that I'd totally take my kids to.
Yeah, same.
I love it. They don't know Betty Boop on the screen. They don't have that kind of, they don't have that with it. So, they're not going to they're going to make decisions based on what they see in this show, and what's going on in this show, I think, is pretty, if you take it by itself, totally works, for me. But then it's the baggage that I'm carrying with me.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that hard?
Yeah, sure.
So now that I've laden your watch with baggage, I apologize.
No, but
it's very weird.
Well, but there are, and the reason I think Tracey feels compelled to bring this up is because we know that there are a number of times that Black artists have had their work usurped by people who did not care to give them the credit that they deserved. And that is wrong and tragic, and it should not be. Yeah. So, I think Tracey is acknowledging that, and hopefully at some point, who knows where that. I'm like you, I can know a few plot points of that conversation, but not at all fully understand it, not even close, to this kind of decades long conversation about whom was Betty Boop based on.
Yeah.
But
we know who she's drawn on.
Right.
On top of.
On that rotoscope.
Yeah.
So,
that's what we know. So.
Yeah, we do know that. So, anyway. It is an important conversation. Yeah. It is an important conversation. I don't get the sense that it was weighing heavily on the mind. I don't know. I don't mean that they were being dismissive. I think they just wanted to create a fun show. You know what I mean? And this, I don't know. I can't say. But
and again, naivety.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you on that. I definitely hear you on that.
So, So every show that we bring, though, got some complications. There's never going to be anything that's like, slam dunk.
That's right.
That's
right.
I mean, except
nothing else to say. No notes.
Yeah, no notes. None whatsoever.
We're going to bring the notes.
I know. I mean, I have to give, I'm going to be, again, really interested to see what the creators say about that, that conversation and everything. And the fact that it's like the things that we know. We don't know. No one was in the room when they created her based on either this Black artist or this white artist. Nobody's in the room.
And Tracey's talking here about the original Betty Boop, the Fleischer Studios.
Exactly.
Yes.
Nobody knows that. What we do know about who they rotoscoped, we have that information. Given that, the creators of this musical went with an African-American artist to play Betty Boop, and I think it was a masterful decision. So.
Well, regardless, she is spectacular by all accounts. Her name is Jasmine Amy Rogers, and unfortunately she's not touring. I did check because I really wanted to see her.
Yeah. I mean,
but she's decided to she's decided to stick around Broadway, and I don't blame her a bit for that. But I would love to have had the chance to see her in this show because it sounds like she was just masterful. So at any rate, that's something to be aware of. And this rotoscope is definitely a huge piece of that puzzle. And what Tracey, just to clarify, Tracey is illuminating the fact that when they traced the bodies, there were multiple bodies used for Betty when they drew her, and they were often bodies of color.
Yeah.
And that was not,
especially in the dance sequences.
Right. And that was not properly acknowledged. If acknowledged, in fact, it was.
I don't think it was acknowledged.
Refuted.
At all.
Yeah, it was refuted, right? Because I don't know. I haven't done that.
I don't know if it was refuted because it seems to be common knowledge that that's what they used along the way. Obviously, in the 20s, they weren't. They do not have the hindsight of our timeline, right? And so they're not thinking about this at all.
Yeah, sure.
So, it's not like, this is again, we're in a different timeline.
Well, and indeed, and to be honest, it was so commonplace. They probably didn't think I need to acknowledge this, right?
Well, I mean, they're, people say that about, Disney animation too. Like,
yes.
What were we using to create X, Y, and Z? When you're using the rotoscope, it becomes, there seems to be controversy everywhere.
Yeah. So, if this intrigues you, go down the rotoscope rabbit hole.
Yes.
Because apparently, I've not done it, but apparently there's a lot to be seen, and it sounds really interesting.
Well, I mean, even I was on our university library, pulling things on this very topic, and that's not normal for Broadway.
Right.
There's quite a bit on it.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and for further study, to anyone seeking further study, rotoscope, look it up, see what you find out, and send us an email if you find something interesting at hello@drbroadway.com. All right, so back to the character of Betty Boop.
This is not over. Anyway.
We have more.
She's like, I'm just going to give the email right now because, my goodness.
No, but if anybody finds anything to add to that conversation, I think it would be interesting to hear. So at any rate, like I've already said, Fleischer's primary competitor is Disney. Disney goes west. They start writing stories obviously directed at children about princesses and mice who can talk and sing and all of those things. Fleischer stays just dyed in the wool in New York City, and they are producing not only Betty Boop, who's enormously popular. She's in about 90 shorts from 1930 to 1939. And when I say shorts, of course, I'm assuming that everybody understands what I mean. But these were the 7-minute cartoons that would play prior to a feature film. So Mickey Mouse was one of these. Steamboat Willie, the precursor to Mickey, was one of those. And that's what Betty Boop was. Another very, very enormously popular, even at one point more popular than Mickey Mouse, character that Fleischer Studios produced was Popeye. In 1938, there was a survey done of movie exhibitors, and they all reported that Popeye was more popular than Mickey Mouse at that point. So a connection beyond just the studio that they shared. Betty Boop and Popeye have another connection. Betty was typically, though not always, voiced by an actress named Mae Kestel, and Mae Kestel was also the voice of Popeye's very tall, very thin girlfriend, Olive Oyl. So you probably can hear some similarities if you know those two characters. Yes. You can think about the similarities.
Very different way of using her voice.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, nicely done.
Oh, yeah. But believe it or not, for a time, Betty Boop and Popeye were so popular that their 7-minute shorts would be billed above the feature film, which is unbelievable. That's how popular they were. But there were problems. And the problems came in primarily in the mid-1930s with the establishment of the Production Code Administration, which was tasked with making sure that films were safe for all audiences, right? This is a precursor to film ratings, basically,
Yes.
right? And we have a group of people who are responsible for previewing everything and determining whether or not there are elements in those things that would be objectionable. And don't you just know, Betty Boop had some things that certain viewers found objectionable.
Funny.
Of course, it doesn't take much for you to assume that these cartoons were not aimed primarily at children. And we think of Pixar as being kind of the great genius behind making cartoons that parents and children can enjoy. But back here we have the Fleischer Studios doing exactly that, where they're embedding some sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge innuendos into cartoons that seem innocuous enough for children. But in fact, Betty Boop has a very short skirt. She's very curvaceous. She has a lot of innuendo in some of the lyrics that she sings. So there's a lot of grown-up things here. A real breakthrough of Betty Boop was that there were guest stars in these shorts. So Louis Armstrong and Cab Calloway would be guest stars, and certainly their music would figure into what Betty Boop would dance to. So you have this adult-ish humor. You have a half-dressed main character. You have irreverent lyrics. And the team at the Production Code Administration was going crazy, and they were getting loads of complaints saying that Betty Boop, the character, was suggestive of immorality. So Fleischer Studios cleans her up. That means they give her a longer skirt, and they start putting her in stories instead of having, men chasing after her. They have, I read one writer wrote, basically every short ended with an attempted rape, which is, I don't mean to laugh at that, but it's right. I mean, there's a lot of her having to shoo away the advances of men. So what they did was they cleaned, or they raised her hemline, they cleaned up her language, and they put her in fairy tale sorts of stories. They made her Betty Boop a housewife, or they made Betty Boop, a princess, much like Disney was doing with Snow White, the first feature film to use animation.
So, yet another reason why it's like, oh, I had no idea Betty Boop was controversial, because
I know
everything that I saw was these short shorts and everything. Every once in a while, you get a hint of that. I mean, obviously, since I've been an adult, I've seen those racy ones that have always ended in almost assaults. And you're like, oh my gosh,
Betty,
are you okay? Betty Boop? Yeah, I know. And I'm like, anyway.
Yes, I know.
It's just a little controversial sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit. And so that's happening. They're having to change up the storylines, which of course makes them somewhat less popular. But here was the real thing that did them in, Fleischer Studios in. So Disney comes out in 1937 with a world-changing event in terms of film, and that is Snow White. Snow White, in fact, which used the rotoscope for its animation. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So it comes out in 1937. It's obviously an enormous hit, and Fleischer is scrambling. What are we going to do? How are we going to keep up? So they attempt their own full-length feature. They produce Gulliver's Travels, which comes out in 1939. It's not as good.
Gulliver's Travels.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
And so they move in 1938. They move the studio to Miami. The subsequent cartoons were criticized as being too sunny. Remember, I mentioned that Fleischer Studios was known for being gritty and edgy, postmodern even, and they lose a lot of that edginess when they move to Miami. They get a little too, I guess, sunny and happy and relaxed, and everything changes. And so Disney begins to explode, and Fleischer Studios it begins to diminish. It begins to diminish. But as we've said, Betty Boop remains in the public consciousness even still. She has a cameo in the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. She was I actually think I was at the 1995 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I think I have a picture of me with that balloon. She was a balloon. And I'm thinking back to my photos. I need to look and see. But at any rate, in the 1995 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, there's a Betty Boop balloon. I mean, this is, 60 years past her prime. And here she is on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And this will blow your mind even still. Well, this number was from an article that was written a couple of years ago. So in the last several years, she was still bringing in about $1 billion in sales per year, just her image. So, all of those kitschy clocks you see, or any place you buy Betty Boop merchandise, at places that specialize kind of in cartoon icons, that she brings in about $1 billion even still.
Yeah.
So it's understandable why Bill Haber, who is a musical theater producer, not just musical theater, he's a Broadway producer, decides he's going to pick up the rights to Betty Boop.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit about Bill Haber first. So Bill Haber, like I said, is a producer. He produced the 1997 revival of 1776.
I loved that one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was like Data from Star Trek.
That's right. Brent Spiner. Right?
Yep,
that's right.
John Adams.
That's right.
And it was hilarious because you grew up loving Data, and all of a sudden this man is angry all the time on stage, and it was like, yes!
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. So he was the producer of that. He later that year produced Frank Wildhorn's Scarlet Pimpernel, which was a big hit on Broadway for a while. He produced the 2002 revival of Man of La Mancha with Brian Stokes Mitchell and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. But also in 2002, and this is important, he produces a play with music by Nora Ephron. Yes, Nora Ephron, the great screenwriter, wrote a play called Imaginary Friends, and it's produced by Bill Haber, and it stars Cherry Jones and Swoosie Kurtz. How about that? And it has music.
I kind of remember this.
I
vaguely
don't.
Yeah, but I vaguely remember Imaginary Friends, and I love Swoosie Kurtz.
Yes.
But who does the music on that one?
Marvin Hamlish.
Oh, okay.
The chorus line guy.
Okay.
And which is interesting because it is billed as a play with music and not a musical. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he does the music, of course. And then it's directed by Jack O'Brien, who is certainly, he doesn't just do musicals, but he does a lot of musicals.
Yeah.
Like the 1994 revival of Damn Yankees, one of my all-time favorite shows. Of course, he did Hairspray. He did Chucked way more recently than that. He's done a number of huge shows. He directs it. And this is where we get something relevant to Boop. It's choreographed by Jerry Mitchell.
Okay.
Right? Who I've already mentioned is the director of Boop. So it's around this time, 2002, that he acquires the rights to Betty Boop. And that made me think, what other cartoons have been musicalized? And because I knew I could never think of them off the top of my head, I did a little research, Tracy, and I found them. There's been Annie, of course, we know all too well, which was the musicalization of Little Orphan Annie.
Yeah.
You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Yeah. And what's considered its sequel, though it never played Broadway, Snoopy, played off-Broadway. Little Abner, Doonesbury. I never knew there was a Doonesbury musical.
Neither.
Apparently, it was, I think, 1983 on Broadway. I didn't know that. Oh. The Addams Family, what started out as a cartoon. Yep. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. Mm-hmm. How about that? So, obviously there is precedent for musicalizing iconic cartoon characters, and Bill Haber, for reasons that I wish I could find but could not, decides that Betty Boop is the one he's going to musicalize.
So this is 2002.
By 2002, he has those rights.
So I know that like Addams Family is in development at that point. SpongeBob SquarePants isn't, obviously, but we know that Addams Family should be kind of
and there was nascent. That 99 revival of Charlie Brown.
Exactly.
And there was a 97 revival of Annie.
Yeah.
Because that was the 20th anniversary.
And I think there was... Yeah, we're moving so far away from comic strips, like it's just not part of everybody's everyday life, that we don't have any more chances. And he may have just been kind of coming along this and being like, okay, what other IPs are there?
I did not even think about. Yeah, but I didn't even think what else was happening on Broadway, but I do know Annie was revived in 97, and there was the revival of Charlie Brown in 99.
And Addams Family comes out, what, 2007?
07 something?
7,
something
8,
like that.
Something like
07, 08,
that.
09.
They're at the beginning of that, and it's like, okay, what do I got here?
Yep. That's a great point. I had not thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I'm sure he was seeing these, cartoons and thinking, I better snatch one up. And
everybody else is snatching
film titles
and
music catalogs
and things like that. He's like, oh,
gotta get something. So in 2005, a 2007 musical is announced that was enormously ambitious because, of course, it was off by about 18 years. The musical, of course, didn't premiere on Broadway until 2025. But even as he has these rights and he's thinking towards musicalizing the story of Betty Boop, he produces in 2005 a musical called Spamalot. Maybe you've heard of it. I think we have an episode on it, right? We do. I think.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Okay. So go back and listen to that. If you haven't heard of Spamalot, go back and listen to that episode. So during Spamalot, he tries to get Jerry Mitchell, with whom he'd worked in 2002 on Imaginary Friends, to choreograph. And Mitchell says, I'd love to choreograph that show. I'll do it. But unfortunately, he's already attached to Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with director Jack O'Brien. He and O'Brien work a lot together. And so he's already attached to Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And when he gets the schedule for Spamalot, he sees that they overlap and he can't do both. So he sticks with Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, but he recommends Casey Nicholaw, who was a dancer choreographer, to do the choreography for Spamalot. And, the rest is history. Casey Nicholaw becomes, alongside, they kind of run parallel tracks, he and Jerry Mitchell. They're both unbelievably gifted at choreography, performing, and now directing. Casey Nicholaw, of course, directed The Drowsy Chaperone. So, of course, I love him. But in addition to that, he directed The Book of Mormon. He directed The Prom. I mean, he's also, like Bob Martin, known for really funny things, the kinds of shows that I love. So for years, Bill Haber is trying to get Boop off the ground. He's trying to work with Jerry Mitchell again. He's trying to get Boop off the ground, and things just aren't syncing up. He goes through a number of songwriters throughout the years, including Andrew Lippa, who'd written the music, interestingly enough, for the Addams Family.
Yeah.
So, and then Jason Robert Brown, who had written Parade. We have an episode on Parade, and Bridges of Madison County, a number of other musicals. So
I would love to hear that.
Robert Brown's
those pitches and again, you know what I think is going to happen is we're going to look at these early episodes. I mean, we're only in season 2. It doesn't feel early for us, obviously, but it's like, if this keeps going down the road, we're going to have to come and round back around on some of this. And you're like, and now we have more information.
That's right. That's what it's for.
Someone has spoken.
Yes.
And I would love to have heard that.
Well, that's an issue. So often you hear, okay, these two were attached. You read rather, these two were attached, but you don't see for how long, how far down the road were they? Why did they fall apart? What happened? You don't know that.
Yeah.
And I wish that we had more information. And you're right. I hope that as time goes by and we get autobiographies or memoirs written by these creators, that they can mention in more detail what happened. Yeah. Why did they fall apart? But in addition to those two songwriters, librettist David Lindsay-Abaire, who was the librettist, I mean, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, but also he's the librettist of Shrek and the librettist of Kimberly Akimbo, which we do have an episode on.
Yes. And Shrek is a cartoon too.
Shrek is a cartoon. That's right. Well, I missed that one, which shame on me. But at any rate, there were a number of big names associated with this, and they fall away for reasons that I don't know, but wish I could find out. So Andrew, Jason, and David, hello at drbroadway.com. Yeah. Send me a note. Let me know why it fell apart if you're listening. But for whatever reason, they fall apart. And so years later, after this whole process has started, Haber meets with 16-time Grammy Award-winning songwriter David Foster, right? Isn't that interesting?
Not a Broadway person.
Not a Broadway person. In fact, when he was asked why he'd never written for Broadway, he said, nobody ever asked me.
Yeah.
So, plus, he was too busy making gajillions of dollars writing pop songs for everyone from Whitney Houston to Peter Cetera to Celine Dion to Barbra Streisand to Toni Braxton and on down the line. But at any rate, and I don't know the timing of this, but if I had to make an educated guess, I think there might be some, there might be some synergy here, but this is purely an educated guess. In 2019, David Foster releases a documentary about his work. And the last scene of the documentary is him walking through Schubert Alley, and he's looking up at all of the marquees and all of that. And the director says, so what's next for you? And Foster says, I want to do a show for Broadway. And what I wonder...
He's 70 years old at this point, isn't he?
Listen, yes, he was 69. He was 75 when it premiered on Broadway in 25.
And so they had to know. Like, they had to have already been working on it at that point. Because you don't say that at the end of a documentary.
I don't know.
And make it a big...
Well, see, that's what I wonder. I don't know. Maybe, because what I wonder, in my mind, because I want it to be like, storybook, I'm thinking Bill Haber sitting at home, and he watches this documentary, and he sees it, and he's lost Jason Robert Brown and Andrew Libet, and then he's like, I'll get David Foster.
Come on.
That's what I am hoping for.
Okay.
I don't know that. That's purely my own invention. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not.
They have him walking through Schubert Alley, like...
Yeah. It does seem a little bit like they are, what's the word? What's the word when you anticipate, like when you're saying your scene partner's lines. What is that word when you're like...
Oh, yeah.
It's not spontaneity. Well, it's the opposite of spontaneity in a scene where you're
telegraphing.
Maybe that's it. That sounds about right. I don't know. It does seem a little too neat, but it would make a great story.
It's a good story.
It's a great story. So anyway, however it happens, Bill Haber... lyricist by this point, Susan Birkenhead, who'd done Working and Jelly/Jam. Mm-hmm. She's attached, and she and Haber meet with David Foster at a Steinway piano store in New York City.
What?
And I promise. Well, I say I promise. I promise this is what I have read based on the historic record. I don't know that it's somebody could have made it up, but I'm hoping that they did not. Because
I'm looking for a new piano, so if you want to talk to me, you just got to come on over.
Right. Like David Foster's like, you can't come to my house, but I'll meet you at a piano store.
We can't go to a normal place. Like, you can't go to Sardi's, you can't go to, yeah.
Yes, right. And maybe they left out we went to lunch first, and then we went to the Steinway store. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
But regardless, as they're at this Steinway store, as the story goes, Haber tells, Foster, or asks Foster rather, if you were to write a musical about Betty Boop, how would it sound? And so Foster walks over to a piano. He sits down and begins to play, and this music just kind of pours out of him. Now, this man has written music like the theme from St. Elmo's Fire, I Have Nothing by Whitney Houston for the Bodyguard soundtrack, You're the Inspiration by Chicago, Glory of Love from Karate Kid Part 2 by Peter Cetera, Because You Loved Me by Celine Dion, Home by Michael Bway. Music pours out of this man, suffice it to say. So he sits down, he plays this music, and they're like, okay, you're the guy, we're going to do this. And so they proceed. And Foster and Birkenhead start to work, and they come up with several songs. In fact, Foster said he's written about 40 songs for Boop and obviously narrowed it down to about 20 that made it into the show. But eventually the work that they did was sent to our friend, Mr. Jerry Mitchell. Mm-hmm. And Jerry Mitchell, again, remember, Haber's been trying to work with Mitchell again since Imaginary Friends in 2002. And now Mitchell is no longer just choreographing, he's also directing. He directed On Your Feet, the Carole King music, On Your Feet, the story of Emilio and Gloria Estefan. He directed Kinky Boots in 2007. I believe his directing debut was Legally Blonde, the musical. He's directed Pretty Woman. He's done a number of shows since he had worked with Haber. And so Mitchell is approached not about choreographing, but rather about directing the show. And Haber sends Jerry everything that has been written. And Jerry listens to it and he says, I wanted to stand up and dance. It was great music, but the story sucked. So I told him, if you want me to come on board as a collaborator, we're going to have to start from scratch. And everybody agreed to that. So that's what happens. And it's Jerry Mitchell who brings in my good friend Bob Martin and said, I think Bob Martin's the guy who has the voice to tell the story of Betty Boop. And so they bring him in. Now, something that's interesting, just a parallel in Mitchell's career, was that he really had to teach Foster how to work as a collaborator. He was used to writing music and lyrics on his own. He'd go off and do his thing and then send the tracks away. But Mitchell had done that with Cyndi Lauper, who wrote the music and lyrics for Kinky Boots.
It is a different process. It is
exactly. Different. Exactly. But he had experience working like that with Cyndi Lauper. And so he knew how to kind of grease the wheel, so to speak, with David Foster.
Yeah. Without making the musician that's used to just feeling inspired about something specific.
Yeah.
Like, how do you talk to this person? Excuse me. How do you talk to this person in such a way where it's like they feel free to write these moments, rather than it's like, I need a song that's an I want song that is about this.
Right. And like, I bet,
that's not how I write.
I'm sure David Foster was like, what's an I want song? You know what I mean? What's an 11 o'clock number? you know?
I mean, I want song. He writes a lot of those.
That's right. But he probably doesn't call them that. So
no, not at all.
I'm sure he had to be talked through a lot of that. And then they bring in, like I said, Bob Martin to write the book. And Martin made a great point when he took on the project. He said, we have what he called graphic awareness of Betty Boop. That means we recognize her, but we really don't know anything about the character, right?
We've just seen little bits of her, right?
That's right.
We've seen that. We've seen
7 minutes at a time.
Iconic poses we know of her.
The boop boop a doop.
Yep, we know that. But yes, but you're right. It's not like we know more about Mickey Mouse. We know more about some of these other characters. I mean, I know more about Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and his backstory than I would ever know of.
Well, and part of that, Martin pointed out, is the fact that she, her stories were 7-minute stories, start to finish, and they were not continuous. Like we had Little Orphan Annie in saga. It was an ongoing saga. So she was developed, that her life changed, and you follow the ebb and flow of that character's life, but not Betty Boop. She was entirely situational, right? Yeah. You get 7 minutes at a time. There's no through line from one episode to the next.
And you got a sense of her personality. Like,
right.
Kind of sometimes she acted a whole lot like what we understand now to be the dumb blonde.
Yes.
Right? Like the things the scrapes that she would get herself into in those, 3 or 4 bits of a comic strip or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. Not like the next day.
That's right.
Happened. It was like this could happen anytime.
And then it wasn't like when you went to see a Betty Boop short, you were expecting to find out what had happened. There wasn't a cliffhanger from the previous episode. And so, that doesn't allow for a lot of character development. In fact, and this is important to Boop, it never allowed her to have a boyfriend, right? Now, I've already mentioned there were many, many shorts where she was pawed after by men whose advances she always rejected, but we don't have the development of a love interest for Betty Boop because we don't really have development of her character at all. And that was, Bob Martin saw that as a real advantage because she would be instantly recognizable, right, as a character, but there was no baggage in terms of her backstory. There was no expectation of, oh, well, how are we going to get Annie to meet Daddy Warbucks, or right? There was none of that. There was none of that, and so
it brings her and makes her not an object.
Yeah.
Again, part of this earlier conversation that we've got before, not just something to be commodified.
Yeah.
It if you make a real connection between characters, which she just hasn't had up until this point.
That's right.
It's interesting.
That's right. So I loved that point. So see, my boy Bob Martin's got some depth.
Yeah, he does.
Let's give it to my boy Bob Martin. I love him.
I'm getting you a t-shirt. I love Bob Martin.
Trust me, over my lifetime, I have loved many boys who have made me laugh. Probably too many. But at any rate, so he starts with his story. And like I said, because he realized she never really had a boyfriend, it's not that she is pursuing, Jerry Mitchell puts it this way, it's not that she's pursuing love. She has no idea that that exists, right? She's never been a part of her world, but she knows that something is missing from her world. And so this becomes the setup of the story. Betty has become bored of the daily grind of Fleischer Studios, right? And she desires a vacation. So thanks to a time machine built by her frequent co-star, Grampy, this Grampy is a character in the shorts, she finds herself in New York City, befriending a superfan named Trish and falling in love with Dwayne. So cute. Bob Martin.
Trish is adorable.
Yes. So Bob Martin describes this as Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And the reason for that is because we've got the two-dimensional world intersecting the three-dimensional world, meets Back to the Future because we have Grampy, helping her to transport between these worlds, and Barbie, though the whole story, Martin is quick to point out, was written before Barbie came out. But Barbie, of course, wants to, Barbie's kind of exploring what it means to be a woman. Well, Betty Boop is really exploring what it means to be human, right? And so the setup is there are two worlds. There's the cartoon world. Everything in the cartoon world is two-dimensional and gray. But when she projects, teleports, whatever you want to call it, to the real world is in full color. And Jerry Mitchell said, the show is saying that you are never full of color until your life is full of love. And that doesn't necessarily mean romantic love. It means love of a pursuit or love of a thing or whatever you love, whatever melts your butter, as we say. You're never full of color until you're full of love. So that becomes
you're never fully dressed without a smile.
Bingo. So that show premieres in Chicago at the end of 2023, November 2023. It's actually the fifth show that Mitchell has tried out in Chicago. He loves to try out there. He loves my man Chris Jones, who writes for the Tribune. He loves his feedback, respects his feedback. So he's opened Pretty Woman and On Your Feet and Kinky Boots and Boot. All have opened in Chicago. Of course, as usual, there are many, many revisions. Jasmine Amy Rogers gets glowing reviews, but it needs work, essentially, which could be said of absolutely every musical, I think, when it previews, right? So they work on it for another year, and then it's ready for Broadway April 5th, 2025. It opens at the Broadhurst Theater. It's a $26 million musical. That's very high. Jerry Mitchell's known for being, certainly he has big budget musicals, but he's known for really being, strategic in his use of funds. But this budget kind of exploded. $26 million budget. And it actually gets
going up and up and up and up and up.
Right. We've talked about that, and nobody knows the answer to that conundrum. But it gets pretty warm reviews. I mean, Tracey, I was surprised, given how quickly it closed. I was surprised to see how warm the reviews had been. Of course, like I've already said, they were glowing for Jasmine Amy Rogers as the title role, Betty Boop. But for whatever reason, that did not translate into ticket sales. It did not translate into awards. It actually was nominated for 3 Tonys. It wins none. It's nominated for 11 Drama Desk nominations, and it wins 3 of those. And then it closes July 13th after 112 performances. And I unfortunately didn't get to see it, but I will see it the first chance I can on the road. So there you have Boop.
Wow.
What do you think?
I'm interested. I'm super interested to see it when it comes through.
Yeah.
It's probably the first one that we've done that we've been like, I'm not really sure why the response is what it is.
I can't figure it out.
And the only thing that I'm thinking is just that we have a complicated history with her.
Yeah, maybe.
Because it is like, it's fun. I mean, I loved it.
Yes,
I loved great. Going across with it. I thought Jasmine Amy Rogers was, I was like, when you can track with the soundtrack and just a soundtrack,
and you can figure things out. Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, like I'm loving every moment of this.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
What a good way to bring this over. But I mean, I think I said at the very beginning, it is kind of like, how are they going to do that on stage? Number one.
Yeah.
Because it's not Little Orphan Annie. It's not Snoopy. It's Betty Boop. But it's like, what is that person going to look like?
Right.
And two, just the complicated history of who's she based on and what, what's being brought forward and just her visual depiction. I don't know.
I know.
Because it is, I mean, as far as a show is concerned, it's well constructed.
Yeah.
It's really good. I mean, it's a good show.
Yeah.
So why are we as an audience base maybe not supporting it in the same way? Because it's not like we can go say, oh, it's a little rough here. It's a little rough here. Which we say about other ones.
Right.
But, I think we have one that's just like the IP itself is just a little bit complicated. And even
Maybe
redeeming her, right? Even in attempting to redeem her, we still are like, ooh, we're walking in feeling like, oh, this is complicated. I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know either. I wonder if, historically speaking, like post 9/11, post, stock market crash 1929, we want escapist, kind of happy, frothy theater. Do we want that anymore? I don't know that there's, other than me, who loves it, I don't know that there's the same demand for that kind of theater that there used to be. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that the purpose of theater is changing. And I think that part of that is how, I say this to the kids all the time, that healthy connection between art and commerce that's supposed to like keep everything, they're supposed to like both be these opposing forces that are like kicking towards one another and keeping everybody in check, is completely out of balance at this point. We have $26 million musicals to open and close, and that this has kind of ruptured things. So it's kind of, you kind of say, okay, so what are the ones that people are going after? The thing is that it's like, if you look at the history of the last 10 years, and this is why we don't usually do it, because it's too early.
Yeah.
But if you look at the history, like, we love Hamilton, and then we want something that is just purely escapist, and then we want something else, and then we just seem to have very eclectic tastes. And I think that's another thing that, you go back to looking at who America is right now. We are all over the map.
Yeah, that's true.
We can't find the consensus that we've been able to find in the past.
Well,
so
that might be part of the issue here.
Yeah,
because maybe that character is not as recognizable as they thought it was.
We think it is. Yeah. So,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we're going to find that this time in theater history is going to be very much an enigma, because there's so many different things happening to our society that our cultural products are not reflecting us very well, I don't think.
That's very true. You know what I want to do today, and I'm going to do it. I want to look at, in this era when nothing is playing on Broadway long term, nothing except for a handful. I want to look at maybe the last 15 years, the shows that have burst through, the Hamiltons, the Hadestowns. Are there any that would be, I mean, maybe not since Book of Mormon have we had a comedy that has staying power? What am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing something. I'm going to look at what's lasting in an era when everything is closing in 3 months. What is running?
Six is funny.
That's very true.
But again, Six.
But it's making a point.
It's making a point, but it is not even when they tried to make it more American and make the middle one more of a Dolly Parton character, which didn't work very well. But
right.
It's very British.
And it's
not our story.
It's not escapist. No, I mean, it's fun as all get out, but it's not like Mamma Mia, you know?
No. But then you have something like, Book of Mormon. That is a story about us. And we laugh all the way through it. But I'm sorry, there's no less social commentary in that one than there is in...
That's very fair. That's a very
Hamilton.
Fair point. Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I think I'm going to say it. I think what's happening right now is very reflective of the fact that the United States is not united at the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
And Americans don't know who they are.
Right.
We don't, you look at the scholars of nationalism basically sit back, Leah Greenfeld is one of the ones that I really, really like, and how she looks at nationalism and she says there has to be a unifying factor that everybody can agree on. And a lot of time that's language or a shared biological roots.
Like at Wicked, shared villain.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But that's the problem, is that usually if you look at Germany, you have a shared language, you have shared biological roots that go back in that time period for hundreds of years.
Right.
Right. And so they're all things tied to the land, things tied that tie people to one another in a way that when we come here, the only thing that to be an American we're supposed to agree on is the Constitution. That's about the only thing. What is our unifying principle?
That's true. That's a great point.
It's something that is conceived as a melting pot.
Right.
And I think we've gotten to the point where right now we're struggling to agree on democracy.
Right.
So let's look at that. I think that's something that you're going to hear more and more of is we don't know ourselves. Then there's no way we're going to put out cultural products that are going to sell. And it's going to kind of destroy...
Because it won't be authentic.
Because because you can't because it's not speaking to the country. For it to be an American musical, it has to speak to the largest volume of people possible. And that is a tall order in America. It has always been a tall order, but there's always been something we could hang on to. Based on where we were, and we're just not finding that right now.
Right. Right. I think that's a great point. And I also think there's a reckoning, now that I think about it, there's a reckoning within comedy as to what are we allowed to laugh at. And I think there's some discomfort maybe with some in, it's like the writers of The Office, the creators of The Office have said, we could never make that show today. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that we are in a time of reckoning of what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And so creators of comedy are, with the exception of Danny McBride and his crew, if you know, they're afraid to go too far. And certainly with Broadway being a mainstream audience, Danny McBride, I mentioned, if you don't know, Danny McBride makes shows on HBO and like The Righteous Gemstones, where he makes fun of...
which we've actually spoken about before on this podcast.
Have we really? I can't remember.
Yes, because you made me watch them while we were on our 10th anniversary thing, and that's when I came back. I
told you I like to laugh!
Oh my gosh. We died laughing. We were like, first of all, what are we watching? Was our first thing, but we made it all the way through on that cruise. Let me just tell you.
But okay, so you've got people like Danny McBride who are not afraid to go the full distance, right?
Yeah.
But also working in a more niche sort of audience than a mainstream Broadway audience.
Yeah, but I put him in the same category as Trey Parker,
Matt Stone, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's once you pass this line.
Oh gosh, yes. Just keep going.
It's like everybody knows what you're like.
There's no lines anymore.
Because
but even Book of Mormon, I wonder, and this is absolutely a useless thought experiment, but if could it premiere today? It's still running, but could it open today? I don't know. Anyway, these are fascinating conversations, and I have my work cut out for me because I'm going to figure out what are the nothing is running for a long time, but those that are breaking through that kind of 3-month, 4-month, 6-month ceiling, what shows are they and what are the common denominators? And I'll report back.
Yeah.
So I've got my work cut out for me.
And just know that as we're doing these things, the stuff that comes closer and closer to when we record them, they are harder to do.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're doing Boop
that too.
Yes. Yeah. And we've talked about this. We've talked about how, historians don't really get their arms around something for 20 years minimum after something has happened.
Because I feel like we're putting out this episode and being like, yeah, we got nothing, but here's an episode. It's like,
I think we've given them plenty of bang for their buck.
But basically what you're seeing is, like 6 months out after it closes, this is what we're thinking about at least. And it won't become clear. But again, as always, still go see it.
Of course.
Because also it means that you guys get to be part of the conversation of how we interpret this later. And that's incredibly useful. Like we need more than our one perspective. Like what we're banking on is more people are going to go see it and
I know I'm going to go see it ASAP.
Yeah.
I won't miss it.
Let's do it.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in for our next episode when we'll be discussing another one of these very new musicals, the Buena Vista Social Club, which I'm excited to dig into. Until then, you can connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com. We'd especially love to hear from Andrew Lippa, Jason Robert Brown, or David Lindsay Bear about why you fell off.
Why did you not stay with Boop?
Also, Bill Haber, you're welcome to come on the podcast and talk about why you bought the rights to Betty Boop.
Because we actually really want to know.
We do. That's the kind of thing that I am fascinated by. So connect with us via email or on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.